how can one follow the eloquence of him? I mean, it's absolutely amazing what he's got in his mind. So,
GPs have to learn how to rub it, that's what it is, you see.
Well, I'm very honoured and privileged to be here this evening.
Thank you,
It's just a great privilege. I'm very grateful to Joe and Gordon for all sorts of things, not least bringing me here tonight, but they've been splendid. And it is wonderful coming to a place which is the centre of so many healing patterns which radiate out from here. It's like a sun spreading light out in many ways on all the different patterns. So this is being recorded, incidentally. It's being recorded, and I must tell you, there's a film which I've been cooperating with. A film is being produced on the subject of healing, and it's involving many, many people of note, and it's going to be a first, and it's a remarkable film, and we're discussing a series of healing in the 5 or 6 main religions. So there's going to be something being prepared on this pattern now. I knew nothing about healing until 1977-78. I was a lawyer. Basically, I was brought up by immigrant parents who came from East Europe, and I was brought up in the wild East End, and I, was in bombing and slept on tube platforms and things like that during the war. After that, I spent 2 years in the army. And I think the King was hurt, King George then was hurt too much, and when I departed in 1948, thank God he's gone. But it was very fascinating in the army, meeting all the German and Italian prisoners of war, and seeing the different characteristics of people. It was most interesting indeed. I then, at the age of 24, qualified as a solicitor. I've been articled in the City of London, earning, I didn't go to university, earning for the first 4 years £1 a week. And in the last 6 months, it rose to £1.50 a week. I therefore qualified at the end of 51, and in 1952, my mother said, there's a couple of £100, go and start your own practice. So I had half a room, a chair and a table in Fleet Street, just above Prince Henry's room, the room that survived the Great Fire of London. And I continued as a sole practitioner there with enormous luck in so many ways. I advanced from there to 3 rooms in Soho at the corner of Brewer Street and Wardour Street. I never forget the actors in Wardour Street, George Cole and others, who came to me and said, Aubrey, we bought a horse. Will you deal with the legal side of it? Why have you bought a horse? Well, we want to lose money to set it against our income. And of course, you know what happened. The horse kept winning. So I took part in the Soho events of the 1950s and early 60s, 1950s particularly. We had a terrific time in Soho then. We had a fair, we had a waiters' race, we had a Soho beauty queen, and I entered the Calypso I wrote in the Calypso competition, but it came nowhere. Only Trinidadians could write Calypso. And from there, everything was expanding at a colossal rate. And so I moved to Lincoln's Inn Fields, where I had about 6, 7 rooms and staff and so on. And so everything was growing at a colossal rate in my practice. Heaven knows why, but there you are. And then in the early 70s, about 71, it was too much for one person to have all this going on. And good friends of mine in 2 other firms, we got together and we formed a big firm of which I remained for 25 years as the senior partner because I was the oldest and not the wisest. And that was an enormous experience, and it set out in this particular book, Brief Encounters of a Legal Kind. Incidentally, the title came from the Inspector of Taxes. They came round to my house one day and said, "You owe some tax." I said, "Yeah, I owe some tax, I'll pay it." I said, "I've been busy with a book." He said, "What are you doing? What's it all about?" "It's all about my cases, main cases." And the Inspector of Taxes man said, "What are you going to call it?" I said, "I don't know." "Why don't you call it Brief Encounters of a Legal Kind?" So at the front of the book it says, "This book is dedicated to my wife, who did all the typing, to my mother-in-law," what a mother-in-law I had, she was a tough girl, "and to my tax inspector who suggested the title be adopted." That's in the book. So I carried on, and marriage, children, and all sorts of things. And then in 1977, my son David came home from university with a problem in his back, and it turned out to be an inoperable cancer of some kind. Now, what a blow a thing like that was and is, and I had no idea what to do. I know I sat there with the specialist in one of the hospitals, and he sat there smoking a pipe. Shows you about smoking. This specialist sat there smoking a pipe. And going through the conventional patterns, there seemed to be no solution for this wonderful young man and how to deal with it. And so I heard about healing, and I started to meet different healers. I could give you the whole George, Chapman, the famous healer, Fricker, all these people. I met some of the leading healers in London. Fricker said to me, "Go back, your son's in bed, put your own hands on your son's back." And I was amazed at that, but my son got benefit from that pattern. And I met one or two other healers, and I also became very friendly with a man called Leslie Flint, who was probably the greatest medium in Britain. And so there's a whole story that elaborates there as well. My son was given a week or two to live by the conventional doctor. And I took him to Frinton to a natural health practitioner, a man called Keki Sidwa. And my son lived another 9 months, and during that time he drew the most amazing colourful paintings and drawings, which my wife turned into tapestries, and which are really, that's just an example of my new book, absolutely wonderful. So we have these wonderful tapestries at home. And so it was largely due to my son's illness that I first heard about healing and met the healers and the alternative processes. And one day, a Mayfair hairdresser came to see me in my office. And he said, "Aubrey, I'll have to give up my profession." I said, "Why?" And he went like this. He said, "My fingers are crooked like this." I said, "Go to the hospitals and doctors." He says he tried, but there's very little approach that could help him, he said. So he's a nice guy. So I got hold of his hand, and I went like this. You see, I said, "You poor fellow, don't give up your practice. You're a leading Mayfair hairdresser." Anyway, he went away. Next day, I get an excited hairdresser ringing me. "Aubrey, what did you do?" "Why?" "My hand is normal." That was my first introduction to the process of healing. That was in 1978, I think. And that was a pattern that developed very, very greatly. So I got very excited. I went to the College of Psychic Studies, and I said, "Look, I was able to help this fellow. I want to register for a course here in healing." And I met a marvellous woman called Elizabeth Farrell. I don't know if any of these names register with any of you. Probably not, because it's way back. And she was in charge of the course for training healers. And I said, "Look, what's happened, you see?" And she looked at me and she said, "Aubrey, you don't need any course. You are a natural healer. Go away and heal." And that is what I did after that experience. And I have set out a great deal of the experiences I had in this book, Journey into Mortality, which tells the story of my son and the battle for his life and what happened after he died and the communication that took place through the mediumship of Leslie Flint. And the most extraordinary, it's like a flower opening all of a sudden, and the extraordinary information that I received. And it's all in this particular book with some marvelous comments by Martin Gilbert, Eric Siegel, Martin Goff, and so forth. So I got to know all these people, and they were very taken with what I was doing. So what happened? Being able to heal and knowing I could do this, I didn't tell any of my partners at all, because they would say, like Tim was saying, the conventional medical man would say, oh, what a nonsense, see? Or self-induced ideas and things like that. So I didn't tell my partners about it. Just as a doctor who can heal and can do things may find it difficult to convince people who are conditioned by education and practice. And so these things are very difficult. But things started to happen in my practice. Somebody in the cash office came in like this, see, and I was able to heal her. And she went out upright. I said, don't tell anybody. And then my personal secretary, we used to have secretaries there who typed things, and she had a whiplashing injury. So she came in to me, oh gosh, like that. So I was able to help her and reduce all the pain and so on. Don't tell anybody, you see. But as I say in the book, if the insurance companies employed healers, they wouldn't have to pay so much out on whiplash injuries. So all these things were developing. And then various clients came to me. After all, I was acting as lawyer for a number of governments, a number of prime ministers, some of the biggest insurance companies here and in America. We had a very terrific practice. I was going to Paris, I was going to Italy, I was going to different places. I went to Washington and spoke to the lawyers of Washington and so on. So we had a worldwide practice. I had the most extraordinary position that the governments in the United Arab Emirates, two of the governments came to me as a Jewish man and said, Aubrey, would you represent two of the Emirates? I became the Jewish lawyer for two Arab Emirates, which is a bit unusual. But what I always found, and the Ramadan people tonight will confirm this, what I found when I met and went to their homes and so on, the men sat there and the women sat there. And it horrified me. It horrified me. Then they gave me an award, a Muslim award. So I'm probably the only Jew who is as an award as an ambassador for Islam. I got this lovely certificate which they invited me to Paris and gave me this thing. So my life has been a very strange, mixed up life with all sorts of people. Clients started to come. Aubrey, we've got a legal problem. All right, what's your legal problem? Okay, so not much of a problem. But Aubrey, while you're here, my neck and my back I found that people were coming to me with ostensible legal problems, but they weren't legal problems, basically. They could have, and whenever it was a woman a problem, I insisted her husband came with. So I remember a couple of Cypriot people who came to me, and she had an awful problem, like that. And I was insisting that the husband was there, and he lay processed. Better. Incidentally, the Irish story of the man who made a claim in the Irish courts and he was injured and he could barely raise his arm. And the judge said to me, show me how you can raise your arm. It went like this, see. The judge says, before the accident, how could you raise the arm? Show me. And he went like that. Story. So my part was, there are got one passed away and one got Parkinson's, and one was we have a whole list of parts. You know, legal firms, financial time institutions. Just once upon a time, the law was legal to serve justice. And today, the legal firms are money matters. So much really earning enormous life. So as an hour, I'm told if maybe the senior partner of a major firm saw some, it would be astronomical idea per hour, which reduces the whole idea of going to lawyer and serve justice. That's like, might as well open a factory or this is what will do something unprofessional. So this was happened to professions and in the law and the mostly ordinary. I dealt with extraordinary cases. There was the first criminal case in British history. Somewhere where kid was McCarthy by elderly is kidnapped Mrs. High error for missing Kale. Kidnapped British. And the amazing is the first case in Irish history. One of the and the defending the police people in charge and police officers as the senior officers in charge. They just didn't know what to do. They never had kidnapped Britain. But they asked, we never had an American case, being kidnapped. So Australia, I think also where they had kidnapping cases, media. And also asked, they went some mediums, if they information to ask some to see interesting. Was anything like it as well? It was very interesting. Like that. And so things were playing all sorts of things together, the case being visits, the problems. But really, people come as either ostensible problems, but in me, and so I've seen people in my there in practice. And therefore, that's what you can, we hear money, I mean, what are here? Make a lot of them here, so what are you, so are you there, people? But we have really to be as for help to profession. Well, and I fortunate I had as I could help you to just after you, 10 men who are doctors, approach a doctor had here who had the same you want which help. That right, you specific field of knowledge. All right, that is had specific technical medicine, or and it's crucial, whether it's two, whether it's law, things like that. But you have with the purpose of that work. The purpose to see that you're done. That was my work. The justices I had, and that was my highest, people like, or some of all the caste level governments active, nearly a lot of Caribbean governments, and they were confident placed in you. I have those awards, the Queen, in the war as the from Barbados, not the Queen. I think in Queen of Barbados, very interesting. Queen of the, she said, my favorite thing. Repeated every time. She's 6 months older me instead. Now 9, What's older than what wonderful will do now is having all I want to do my personal things into death to deal with her cases. What I describe is a few healing voices. I describe within spirituals healing and so individual in my new published months ago, and I got the book just a couple of months ago. I met some pictures of healers, wonderful people, wonderful people, Barbie, Leslie Flint, side movements, inside, well, no, there's a great Barbara Museum. And McKenna, great healer, and nephew her, he was a birthday healer. And I went to 100th woman. Wonderful Farrell, Harry, Elizabeth, Harry Edward there. He was the Edward healer by Edward Hurdles. He excellent. And other, like Irene, you've never heard of wonderful people like you. And now we've got it up as healers. So, and we've got all these people who, all these people spiritual and in the field of spiritual life, except that is the work in spirit and with us is beyond. It's a play I've got us and of us, who was given the most wonderful teachings from his present abode, and Air Chief Marshal Lord Dowding, the victor of the Battle of Britain. And Air Chief Marshal Lord Dowding was a spiritualist of no mean standing, as was Mackenzie King, the Prime Minister of Canada. So my new book is a personal, it's called A Spiritual Autobiography, because the previous Rainbow book was all about organizations. So what I want to do is just to give you an example of a few cases. This brief encounter of an equal kind, you've got some of these things. It's also my children's book there, for children, beautifully illustrated. Lord Wolfe, the Lord Chief Justice, said, "A source of enormous enjoyment, his stories are irresistible, amusing and humane. They reveal a deep understanding of human nature." And I wrote that for him. And then it tells all about me, and tells all about the cases. He was very kind, Lord Wolfe, and wrote it very nice. So there's about 20 or 30 cases illustrated in this book. So I'm just going to try and say to you this. The doctor, the lawyer, the other professional has to be knowledgeable in their profession, has to carry out patterns in accordance with the professional standards. But there's nothing to prevent a professional person going beyond that, not for finance, going beyond, I never charged anybody anything, going beyond that and using your knowledge and your contact to help people. And what I'm going to give you now is a few cases only which describe a different kind of healing. It's not the laying on of hands, it's not a prayer, it's not anything of that nature. It's saying people come to you in a most agitated, worried, tense time. Can you, with your knowledge, with your professional advice, ease their pattern and reduce and remove the problems that they have? So, I've got a case here, the consul. There was a consul of an overseas government who went to Fulham Broadway, decided to go to the toilet. In the toilet, there were two homosexual men. The consul was the least homosexual person he could find. He was very much a sort of a man's man type of thing. And he came out, the two men came out, and the police arrested all of them, all three of them. Because then there was the law of homosexuality and so forth. This man, the consul, his name was Jeremiah, incidentally. This man was absolutely shocked at what happened. He and his family, children, wife, they were absolutely appalled and horrified and ill and so on. He was particularly concerned with what he was accused of, which was diametrically opposed to his passion of life. So he comes to me and we try and help him. And I felt there was something wrong here. The police were trying to do something and it didn't feel right to me. They said they observed what was happening through a certain window at a certain height. And I got experts to come, and the experts could show that it was impossible to see anything, and the whole story was made up because they were late for getting back and reporting. The whole thing was made up. So think what they did. Now the two other men, we went to court, the magistrate's court, and the two other men were prepared to plead guilty because they didn't want their families to be upset by the publicity. I walked up and down the corridor of the court persuading them not to, and they didn't. They agreed with me. We got up and we told the magistrate not guilty, all three of them. And when the case came up further, it was thrown out. It was shown to be what it was. Now, the problem there was the agitation of my client and his wife and children. Illness, real illness, And by taking up the cudgels on his behalf and showing what had happened, we were able to clear his name and remove the whole stain on his character, as he saw it. And that is a form of healing, because you have taken away the stress which encompassed these people. And that was so important. So that was the consul. And the little child shall lead them, that's the heading. Now, a lot of people came here from different countries. And there was an Indian set up in West London to help young people, older people, who had all sorts of problems. It was a very fine organization. A little child was brought over from abroad. The child had been neglected abroad and was brought over. And the child joined his parents, the little boy, and they lived normally. All of a sudden, the local, and the boy received certain injuries playing in the playground. Reported to the local authority. Local authority, we must protect the boy from his parents have done all this. Took the child away from the parents. They were horrified. They were a close family. And the Indian man who was running this unit, a lovely religious man. And so what happened? Anyway, they came to me, could I help them? So I went to their house, and all the people who lived in that establishment said, they are marvellous parents, they're wonderful. Nobody had inquired into what had caused the injuries to the little boy. And here you have parents on a rack, accused, brought to a court for their behavior, bad behavior to a child. And they took the child away from the home. Imagine the effect on the child of being snatched away, living in a different milieu, a different pattern of life. It was shocking for everybody. Anyway, I went into it pretty thoroughly. To make a long story short, we were able to prove that the parents were marvelous parents, that the child was perfectly safe, and that the school was frightened to report the accident in case it reflected on the school pattern and the school officials. So people will try and protect themselves and throw blame onto others in that way. So it was important to take up the case and to take up the cudgels. And money, I couldn't give a damn about money. Thank God my partners cared about money. But that was so important. We always prosecute. You see in certain shops, we always prosecute. My book's got 5 cases where I defended people who were being prosecuted, and so on. And some shops, we always prosecute. You may have seen these signs. We always prosecute. A woman in her late 80s, widow, upset. There was a big tree near her house. Would it fall down? She wasn't very, she had not a lot of support from anybody. And there she was in the magistrate's court. Now, I had introduced in that court the duty solicitor scheme. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. It's a scheme whereby lawyers who are prepared to come to the court and help people who have no representation at all. So I introduced such a scheme into Hendon, and I used to go along every Monday and spend Monday morning helping people. My partners nearly went mad because it was the most economically inefficient thing you could have. I meet this old Jewish woman, Mrs. Gold or something like that. She doesn't know what's happening to her. What had happened? She'd come out of a bread shop holding a bread in one hand and the money for it in the other hand. But her mind was so taken up with my home and the tree, and will my home fall down, she'd forgotten to give the money. The manager came out, we always prosecute. No feeling, no understanding. This ancient old woman. So we always prosecute. So I said to the woman, You had the bread, you had the money. She said, I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing. My mind was on all my problems at home and so on. She was a widow and so forth. Anyway, when the manager went into the witness box, I gave him a terrific time of it. And I told him what a disgrace to treat a woman like that, who had the money in her hand. And you could have said, all right, pay the money, and that's the end of it. We always prosecute. That's their motto. I don't think that manager will rush to prosecute in a hurry after I finish with it. Anyway, the magistrates, there were 3 magistrates sitting there, lay magistrates. And eventually I was able to explain to the woman what had happened. And she said, I said, the magistrate said you were not guilty of anything at all. She left where she was sitting in the dock, and she went up to the magistrates and shook everybody by the hand. Shook all the magistrates by hand. A simple lady in a court for the first time in her life. So you get the balance. What would have happened to that woman? She would have had a fine. It would have been against her reputation and so forth. Why do people do these things? We always prosecute. The bubble reputation. I forget the bubble reputation. These are libel cases. I had a number of libel cases. Newspapers had a great big headline just to sell papers. And they chastised and condemned the mayor and the mayoress for something they didn't do. So the mayor and mayoress came to me of the London Borough, and by the time we finished, the paper paid, apologised on the front page, etc., etc. Why do people do these things? All right, you want to sell papers? You be responsible. You don't condemn people like that. The last case I referred to, I wasn't going to, but somebody said I should refer to it, is the one-day case. This is a case that started on Thursday and finished on Friday. Ever heard of such a case? This, I think, is unique in legal history. South Africa, apartheid government. 19-year-old medical student was teaching English to some of the black people there. The apartheid police got hold of him, put him into solitary confinement. No charge. The law was an emergency law and they could do what they liked. There's this 19-year-old, perfectly innocent medical student in prison. The lawyer in South Africa could do nothing. The mother went all over the world. The stress and the upset to the mother. She went to American Congress, she went to Europe, she went all over the world. She came to London, and she went to a well-known rabbi, a rabbi called Hugo Green. You may have heard of him. He survived the camps and so forth, a wonderful man. He heard the story and he said, go and see Aubrey. So she came to see me Thursday morning with her daughter, explained the case. I said, we can do nothing from a legal point of view here or in South Africa. But I have an idea. Now this is very interesting. The South African government was having sanctions against it for its policy by the Commonwealth. On Saturday, that's 2 days after I saw this woman, there was going to be a major meeting of Commonwealth leaders to increase the sanctions. The only person who said the sanctions we've got are quite enough was Mrs. Thatcher, who was Prime Minister. So the South African government were then dependent on Mrs. Thatcher taking a certain point of view. I said to the mother, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to tell Mrs. Thatcher what's happening. Ah, how do you do that? Anyway, I got hold of her agent. I said, I'm going to Downing Street tomorrow morning at 9:30 or 10 o'clock with a statement about this young man in this apartheid regime. Okay. Drew up the whole thing, went to Downing Street and was actually invited in. No Mrs. Thatcher, but the case was presented as to the breach of human rights. How can you support a government which put some medical student in prison for doing nothing? We told the South African embassy in London that Mrs. Thatcher was looking into the case of this young man. The South African embassy took fright because they were dependent on Mrs. Thatcher. They immediately contacted the government in Pretoria. At 2 o'clock on Friday, the boy came out free. At 2 o'clock on Friday. The case began on Thursday and finished on Friday. It's an amazing case. The woman was overjoyed, her family were overjoyed. Now that wasn't the exercise of the law, but it was a form of healing of a regime. It was a form of healing through one's knowledge of what was happening and so on. I never charged the woman anything. I said, how much? She would have given £10,000. I said, don't worry about it. We got your son out of prison. Oh, I'll take you out and your wife to a wonderful restaurant. We were still waiting. And my book, I said, man does not live by bread alone. So I tried to illustrate that there is healing as with my son, the healers. There's healing with the staff in my office. There's the healing that I've been able to do on and off ever since 1977, 78. And in fact, I've written a whole story called The Healing Process, which is all the healing I did at a certain period. And there is the healing through using your knowledge, whether it's medicine or law or anything else, for the benefit of people and removing the kind of stress. I remember some of the divorce cases, the terrible effect on men and women, and the really serious illnesses that resulted from the stress between people. So, you have been a marvellous audience, so attentive. I think that's enough illustrating the different levels of healing, and you are doing so many different things here. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
I'm sure people have got lots of questions for you, so I doubt if we've quite finished just yet for our cup of tea, I suspect. So
okay.
Is that all right if we throw it open to question and answer?
Yeah,
at this point?
yeah.
Lovely, thanks.
Well, fire away if you've got any questions. You haven't got any questions, okay.
More a comment, well, because I was told on Sunday you can heal people, so I have done that. But also I work just up the road, there's a North London Forensic Service, so secure unit, people with severe mental illness who've committed crimes. And so I feel then it's a way of healing. You're not trying to heal necessarily, but I think by listening and doing your best to help people in that situation.
Listening can be a healing
Yes,
process.
yeah, and just sort of teaching and helping people to improve their confidence through increased skills. A lot of people there come from other countries, so it's second language. Yes. But some have got very poor literacy skills for a variety of reasons.
Yes.
But I'm sure a lot of people's work, the same way, you use your work, as you said. So, yeah, and I also it's quite nice for me because I come in from the outside, so they're seen as part of the establishment. Yeah, so I hear the moan sometimes, but yeah, and I think sometimes you could just sort of say things sometimes just to encourage people as well.
Yes.
Yes, because I've got a Muslim guy. He'd written to another friend of his. And who was another Muslim who's in prison, but it always ended up with the blessing that Muslims give each other and being a blessing. So I said, well, it's a blessing for me to work with you, and I think you can always say things like that to people.
Yes. There is a big religious base to some aspects of healing, but it doesn't have to be religious.
No.
So you're all satisfied, okay?
From the point of view you were saying there, Aubrey, I'd be very interested to know what your understanding of the energy aspect of healing, and obviously you've met a lot of the names in healing, and the only one I really was familiar with is Harry Edwards, having been down to his healing sanctuary a few times. But what is your personal understanding of what happens in the transfer that goes on with healing in the sense of energy healing or spiritual healing, or Reiki as the popular thing today?
It's not easy to say, where does the healing power come from? Why did I touch that hairdresser's hands and he was made better, which the hospitals were not able to do? And you all, some of you have had similar experiences. What is it? Is it an inherited pattern? My great-grandmother was the town healer in Russian Poland, in college. And there was no doctor. She was the person who went healing people. Maybe it comes down in families. Or maybe there are forces which we don't know, or people we don't know, or spiritual entities who can assist one. It's very difficult to say where the healing power comes from. I think a lot comes from the nature of the person and the way the person looks. The first thing about a healer is that to be a healer is the desire to heal. You can't be a healer unless you want to heal. And then maybe a lot of people, as I saw at the college, learn techniques of healing. And that is also very important. Some people don't, like myself, don't, and have been helping people in all sorts of things. So my son would say, Dad, my knees, do something on my knees, so on and so forth, and other people like that. So I just don't know where the healing power comes from. It can be an inspiration from a particular religious being. It can be that there is an energy floating about which we can tap into. There are all sorts of explanations. There are beings who have passed on, who are helping individuals. There's all sorts of explanations. I can't give a complete answer.
What did you yourself experience when you were helping people in this manner? Did you have any awareness of energy flow? Did your hands heat up or feel cold?
Well, I'll tell you a story of my mother-in-law. Bless her. She lived to 98. She lived her last 18 years with my wife and myself. We looked after her. She was a grande dame formidable. She really was a kind of, she used to get problems such as the blood didn't go down properly there, or her neck or back, things. And Aubrey, come and do your healing on me. And I just put my hands on her, and the blood went down, and everything was getting better. And above all, she slept well. Healing can give a good night's sleep to people. It's very interesting. So, very often, she'd get hold of my hand, and she said, there's a great heat that you're coming through from you, but my hands are warmer than yours. So the heat that the healer gives is not the normal heat. It is a different character of heat, and it must have a different origin. And I think of my mother-in-law, who was a very practical woman. She and Leslie Flint became the greatest of buddies, and he, of course, was the greatest medium we had in Britain. An amazing story. And so, where does it come from? It is somewhere around. But we are constantly learning things in science. You know, this country has been a great leader in science. Darwin and Newton. And they never remember that Wallace also enunciated evolution by natural selection at the same time as Darwin. And Wallace was a noted spiritualist. And they both gave their version in 1858 to the Linnean Society. So it is fascinating. You get a man like the victor of the Battle of Britain. See, where does it all come from? I don't know precisely. All I know is it's marvelous if you can do it.
That's given quite a bit of sort of information, I think, because you're saying, first of all, you do hands-on, because very much what was the National Federation of Spiritual Healers prefer hands-off. They say you don't actually put your hands on, but you're saying you were definitely a hands-on type of healer.
No, I did. That example I give you was a hands-on,
Right.
but I've done a lot of healing not hands-on. I've done absent healing to people abroad. And I think Harry Edwards said absent healing was a more substantial healing than physical. So, yes, you. Yes, ma'am.
Actually, I was going to ask you about absent healing, whether you'd experienced it, and whether you thought it was possible.
I had a great
Really
friend
you
in
do.
Sri Lanka who was the great poetess of the country. Aubrey, she said one day to me on the phone, I've got a frozen shoulder. I said, go to the doctor. The doctor's giving me painkillers. And I said, Aubrey, can you do something? So I tried, and when I heal at distance, I heal using colours. And frozen shoulder went away. She was through to bits. So the process of healing is not limited by the speed of light, which is another major new scientific fact. And science is now discovering, to Einstein and others in quantum physics, that there are patterns faster than the speed of light. So we are, and the religions and science and our fields are coming closer together bit by bit. Please God that there should be a bit of peace in the world so these can come even closer.
When you say colour,
Pardon?
when you say colour, do you mean according to chakras or something else?
No, not according to chakras. I know a lot of people are deeply involved with the chakras and so on. Now, I would say to myself, there are 3 colours I utilize and I try to project them because certain colours have certain qualities.
What are the 3 colours?
Well, I use white, rose, gold and white. And I've been projecting those colours for people when I do absent healing. You know, if the Law Society heard this, they think I'm crazy. You know, I'm still on the record of the Solicitors Regulation Society. I don't take out a practicing certificate because at my age you don't want to go practicing law, but I'm still there. And there you are. So you know, you have this profession and you have other things alongside it.
In my church, we sort of light candles for people and also say people's name for healing.
Oh yeah.
And somebody I was doing that for was very sceptical, but actually he said to me, I have to say, he said, I found it quite frightening. I did feel this change because he said he saw himself that I was in a dark place, you know, and
Yes.
he felt he was very aware.
Yes, well, the religious leaders like Jesus and so on were the great healers. See?
Yeah.
Wonderful healers. And prayer is very important too. The right kind of prayer. But of course Jesus said when you want to pray, go into your room and just pray there. Don't go to any building.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say, Aubrey, when you were first instructed to go back and put your hands yourself on your son rather than get someone else, it was like you were there as a parent wanting the best for your child, you know, you loved your child, and it's that power of that in your work, doing the same thing, you're wanting people's well-being to be maximised, shall we say, and isn't that the essence of healing, where that intention is there with you know, lots of love?
I think that's right. As I said before, you can't be a healer unless you want to heal. And if you want to heal, there's something in you which is projecting you.
It's compassion, isn't it? I mean, whether it's for your child or for another human being, you want to convey your love for them,
Yes.
and that's what healing is.
Yes, healing is a practical
And it
form of
might
love.
not. Healing sometimes takes people into a crisis
Yes.
where all sorts of things are stirred up. It may not produce immediate benefit, Have you experienced that?
With my paper, and brought diet into one of the factors of cancer. And now the cancer research group would say it is an important element in the field. But at that time, the doctors were not talking about diet in connection with cancer. So I was able to push them into looking at this other factor. So it's been I've been very lucky. You know, I've been very lucky. I've had such opportunities to do things, probably drove people mad.
Can I ask, would you say then that the message is kind of that we could all be healers in some way, or is that not the case?
I don't know. We can all heal by what we do and what we say. Whether we all have that power to heal, I don't know. But some people are open to it. Some people are great sportsmen, some people are great painters.
Yeah.
I just don't know whether we all have the power to heal. I really don't know.
Because sitting here now, I'm thinking that perhaps a lot of benign and well-meant behaviour towards other people can actually help, particularly when you're giving those legal examples.
Yes, we don't call it healing sometimes.
No, perhaps not.
Just decency.
But yes, so I wondered whether or not it could be reduced to that common denominator, or whether that was in fact shortchanging the accepted meanings and understandings of what healing was.
No, I think healing is a specific thing.
Right.
Yesterday, another healer and I, in my home, tried to heal two women who were suffering from, is it tinnitus?
Tinnitus.
I can never pronounce it.
Tinnitus.
Tinnitus. Buzzing in the head. And we put our hands and went there to try and heal them. This other healer had already cured a person of that problem through healing, which is, to the medical profession, unbelievable. Yes? Had cured somebody of that. And so these two women said, can we help? So the two of us yesterday were healing these two women, trying to get rid of this terrible business of noise in the head. I don't know whether I succeeded or not. I have no idea. The other healer would have a much greater chance because of, I don't know what you call it, something that is going out.
I think we would, speaking from my position of being chairman of the Dr. Healer Network, we talk about this sort of aspect of what happens in healing, and I think it's very much about the person also wanting to be healed. So we would very much like to think that all healing is self-healing, and the person who's facilitating by providing whatever it is that's coming through you, from wherever that comes, with the compassion and the love that goes with it, is utilised by the person receiving, so that they may choose to use it in that way, or maybe choose not to. So that's, I think, how we would see it broadly from the Dr. Healer Network point of view.
I think that's very important, actually, what you just said,
Yeah.
because in order to feel that you have helped somebody, you have to be able to meet them halfway. I've done healings with people where they said, well, that didn't really work for me, and I could feel the resistance. Some people, for some reason, don't want to be healed, and you can't heal somebody who doesn't want to be healed. You can only gently ease them into it. It has to come from there as well.
I think that's right. One of the first experiences, if I may, Jane,
Yeah.
when I learned that I had this ability to heal, there was a woman out at Enfield called Gladys Hayter. No recognition. Gladys Hayter was a healer. She could also photograph beings which we can't see, which was amazing. But she was a healer, and she said, Aubrey, you're just starting there. So I went to Enfield. She said, Tuesday night, there are two women coming. I want you to try and heal them and make them better. So the two women, the first woman sat there, and I had not done any healing like that at all. Sweat was pouring from me. I was in a hell of a state, and I was healing this woman. And she said, a bolt of electricity has just gone through. And she left upright. The other woman, not the slightest effect, and she went away still suffering with her back. She was antagonistic to the process. So you have to be either with it, but not against it.
And people may not even realise that they think they want to be healed, but there's some resistance going on at a deeper level. So then then they will blame the healer and say you didn't work properly with me. But it's two ways.
It's two ways, absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. The healer and the healed.
I think they often actually get something out of not being healed.
Yeah.
So whether it is that they feel loved or cared for or feel like they get attention or whatever it is, there are often many, many different reasons why somebody might not want to be healed.
Yes, you're right. It's true. I really like to tell you a few jokes. The man died and the wife put an advert in the paper. So sorry my dear husband passed away. The paper rang her and said, look, you're paying so much, you can put an ad in your advert, 4 or 5 more words. So she said, all right, add to the words, Volvo for sale. The other one is grandma holding the grandson, walking next to some stream, little boy falls in, and grandma looks up and says, please God, save my grandson, he will be a great fellow when he gets bigger. I'd do anything, please save my grandson. And the grandson is saved. And the grandma looks up again and says, but he also had a hat. But you see, I've given folks some Jewish humour. So, I mean, it's endless. Humour and laughter and singing are healing elements. And if you can sing, whether you've got a voice or not, and if you can create laughter, do you know there's the story of a man who cured himself of cancer by watching funny films?
Yes.
Do you know that story? Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So you see, a thing like cancer, which is a physical thing, is affected the mind. The mind uses the brain, which is a computer, and the brain uses the nervous system and everything else onto the physical elements. So much depends on the mind and the condition to activate parts of the brain to operate on a part of the body. That's my view, not everybody's view.
Not that far away, about the gift of Alzheimer's. Having heard the talk already, I can highly recommend it. And Maggie is a very, very compassionate but articulate speaker and really passionate about what she's done with this work. I thoroughly recommend it. So if you know anyone who's in the situation of caring for someone with dementia in family, friends or family, who's finding it a real struggle particularly, this is a talk for them. So do spread the word. And remember, we don't have a talk in August. August is holiday time, and we'll be back in September. We know where you're going, don't we? So that's all really. So thanks very much, everyone. We will be packing up, obviously, in well in time for the Ramadan session. When you go, if you could stack your chair at the back, we'd much appreciate that. And look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks very much. And thank you again all.